isekai template that one often comes across is that of a modern-day protagonist without any remarkable features who gets summoned into a parallel world. In that world, he becomes a hero who defeats a demon king or an evil god and then returns to his ordinary everyday life. This is not how it went for Kashiwagi Yuya. In the parallel world, Yuya stares down a menacing evil god and lunges at it with his blade, successfully hacking it apart. The hero is then transported to another plane of existence by a goddess, and is writhing in pain from his wounds while he furiously declares that he will never again be doing that kind of thing. The goddess notes that he seems to be done, chiding him for ignoring her and causing him to angrily point out the state he's in. After she heals him, Yuya asks if everything is indeed over, and she confirms that the evil god Renavilio is gone and won't revive for millennia, allowing the world to slowly return to normal. The boy then tells her to return him back to the old world, and is doubtful of her ability to transport him to the correct world and timeline. She insists that once he carries out the ritual of return at the location she will send him to, he will return safely and all that will be left is for her to do some adjustments on her side. Smiling, she notes that despite being unwillingly summoned from a parallel world, he overcame many harsh trials, and managed to defeat the Demon King and the Evil God, restoring peace and order to the world. Presenting herself as the goddess Valenis, she gracefully offers him her gratitude and blessings. Unamused, he tells her that he doesn't want to be summoned again, telling her to see to it that his work doesn't go in vain. She replies that though she can't meddle excessively in human affairs, she will watch over them to the utmost of her ability. As the Divine Realm is about to close, she advises him to return to the world and show everyone that he's safe, causing him to inwardly chide her for speaking in riddles before vanishing. Stepping out into a destroyed hall, Yuya meets his party and is embraced by a female beastkin. Worried about his well-being, she panics at the sight of the bloodstains on his armor, until he reassures her, revealing that he has already been healed. One of his companions asks if the ordeal is over, and after he confirms that the world has been saved, he tells another one, the princess of the realm, that the rest is up to her, the king, and the others. A third companion then urges him to go outside and inform the people, and he promptly emerges from the building and triumphantly raises a clenched fist in victory, being cheered by the gathered crowd. Though his name is Kashiwagi Yuya, in that world he's known as Yuya Kashagi. He is a university student, and 3 years prior he was summoned from modern-day Japan by Valenis to a continent called Wilterius. Yuya sits in his room talking to the beastkin named Tia, lamenting that he won't be able to meet with her or the others again, despite having fought desperately to return to his world. The girl sobs, and as he tries to comfort her, she outright begins to wail, while tearfully asking if he's really going back no matter what. The shocked boy then apologizes, inwardly recalling that she doesn't have a family after losing her family to slave hunters and becoming a slave herself. He saved her by chance, and as they travel together, the party became her second family. He tells her that he belongs in the original world with his family, and Tia begs him to take her with him. He pauses at this and pets her head, until a maid appears and informs him that the preparations for the return ceremony have been completed. She then asks if he is really returning to his original world, and as he confirms it, she notes that he never tried to lay a hand on her. She then tells the shocked boy that it's not too late, requiring only a minute or two of his time in the empty room next door, but Yuya quickly declines. Unabated, the maid begins to unbutton her blouse and offers Tia to join as well, though she believes it would take more time that way. Yuya is shocked at the maid's jokes, noting her beauty, and being offended by the insinuation that he would only last a few minutes, brushing the matter off as she notices his expression. He is then led into a hall where the king and princess await, with an honor guard standing at attention as he and Tia walk towards them. They bow, but the king honors him, telling him to stand proud. He then asks him if he won't stay in their realm, but the boy remains adamant in his refusal of his generous offer. The king then asks if even Princess Malthuria is not enough to sway him, frantically wondering if it is due to her small bosom. He desperately suggests that they will throw the maid heiress in too, praising her curvy body until the princess smacks him on the head. Solemnly turning to Yuya, Malthuria apologizes for forcing such a burden on him despite being an outsider, offering her and her people's eternal gratitude with a courteous bow. The boy insists that that is not necessary, but the princess insists, hoping that he would decide to stay there, drilling into her father's foot with her heel without saying another word. Crown Prince Leon then approaches Yuya, declaring that he hoped he would be his brother-in-law, noting that it would be boring without him around. He notes that people aren't toys to waste time with, thanking him for everything. Bruno then tells him that he enjoyed their time adventuring and to treat his body well, but a woman named Whisper coldly states that she won't weep for a traitor, still angry about having found him peeping at bathing elves at some hot springs sometime in the past. Turning once more to the king and princess, he thanks them for everything and wishes them the best, and the king returns the greeting, while asking if he has any other wishes before he leaves. The boy only requests that they take good care of Tia, to which they gladly agree. He then pats the beastkin on the head once more, telling her to be good, and she tearfully asks him to come and see her if he ever returns to that world, to which he agrees. He then bows to the majesties and steps away, reaching an altar and apologizing to the princess for the delay. She blushes, stating that they still have ample time to get the ritual ready, and she understands how everyone feels, telling him to call her Mel, like always, since she feels embarrassed at sending him off while he is so formal. Her warm smile tortures Yuya on the inside, with the boy struggling to keep a straight face in the face of such cuteness. She asks him if he is wearing the same clothes he had when he was summoned, and as he confirms it, she states that though they know they had no right to rope him into the issues of Walterius, he didn't bear any grudges towards them, and just went along with their request. She then tells him that she will never forget that kindness, and promises to make the best of it now that he has saved the world. They smile at each other in silence, until she shyly admits that she was expecting him to stay there as her husband. Inwardly, the boy notes that she must be joking as well, since she didn't show any signs before, and lamenting that she didn't say anything, before fully shutting down the thought, stating that taking a princess as his wife would be too much for him. The princess then beckons him to begin the ritual, and as he steps into the altar, she tells him to take care, stating that she enjoyed their time together and playfully telling him to stop peeking, embarrassing the boy. She then begins the ritual, and a bright light begins to shine, until he is completely blinded. As his eyesight clears, he realizes he's looking at a ceiling back in modern-day Japan while standing on a chair. He recalls that he was sitting there when he was summoned before, falling face first as he appeared in Walterius, and he is thankful that no one was present in the room when he disappeared and reappeared. Checking his phone, he sees that he has returned to the exact date of his disappearance, and as he swipes through his notes, he wonders if he will still remember everything, such as what he learned for that semester and the names and faces of the people in his life. Packing things up, he decides to head back home, but not before hitting a Mickey D's and stuffing his face full of cheeseburgers and fries, which he couldn't get in the other world. As he exits the university, he is greeted by a beautiful girl sitting on a scooter. The girl is confused when he greets her, as if they hadn't seen each other recently, and though he tries not to show it, he desperately tries to resist the urge to hug her after not seeing her for 3 years. Her name is Kudo Akane, and has been friends with him since middle school, going to different faculties at the same university. After staring at him, she asks if something happened, noting that his expression and the way he carries himself feels like he suddenly became a different person. Yuya nervously tries to shrug the matter off, stating that there is no way someone can change so quickly. She remains suspicious, however, and asks if he got himself a girlfriend, but laughs after he nervously denies it, mocking his non-existent experience regarding girlfriends. He retorts that her experience is as scant as his own, causing her to call him rude while stating that she could easily find a boyfriend and just isn't interested. Yuya then excuses himself, stating that he has to take care of some business. As he reveals that business is to satisfy his cravings for burgers, however, she quickly joins in and hops on her scooter, speeding toward a nearby burger joint to get seats for them. The confused boy then hops on his own motorbike, heading towards the Mickey D's. Once there, Akane waves at him, and as they sit together, she notes that he walks differently and gives a different vibe, and it even feels like his physique is different, repeating that he just has a different vibe. He tries to brush it off with a joke, before teasing her and suggesting that she might have fallen for him. Unamused, the girl gives him a death stare and threatens to poke his eyes with her straw, while looking away embarrassed. As Yuya takes the first bite of his burger, however, he suddenly freezes in place and begins to cry, quickly rubbing his eyes and excusing himself, stating that he put too much mustard on it. He then departs, heading for his family home, glad to see that nothing has changed there. Entering the house, he sees no one is home, since his mother is working the night shift and his father is abroad working in the Middle East, and he's unsure if Ayumi is in her room. He then goes to his room on the second floor, entering it for the first time in 3 years. He sees nothing has changed, and noticing that the room is dark, utters the word light, causing a glowing orb to manifest in the air. He then falls exhausted on his bed, but then slowly opens his eyes and stands up in the now well-lit room, suddenly realizing that he can still use magic. Yuya continues to stare at the glowing orb in disbelief that he can still use the magic. Gasping, he successfully creates a fireball on his fingertip and generates a gust of wind, thus realizing that he can use magic other than light. Fetching the watch his father gave him to celebrate his enrollment into college, he tries using appraisal on it, and a window appears detailing that it is actually a counterfeit watch with little value, and his father was duped. After recovering from the realization that the watch was worthless, he opens his own status window and checks his stats. He notes how outrageously powerful he must be compared to the standard in the world, especially since he can use his skills in magic, and he leveled up considerably after defeating the evil god. His MP consumption remains the same in this world, and checking the item box, he sees that he has retained a lot of gear, including the Holy Sword. He finds the situation strange, believing his power should have disappeared when he returned, and he would have forgotten about the other world over time as he returned to his old life. Wondering if it might be a dream, he then does a quick recap to figure out why this is happening. He recalls his summoning by Maltheria and how Valenus gave him several skills and sent him to the Ariana's kingdom to train, until he was able to defeat the Demon King. He then realized that the evil god was the true puppet master, and finally managed to defeat him and return triumphantly to the capital before being returned to his original world. Summing up his entire ordeal, he still can't figure out what went wrong, only thinking the goddess might have done something to him but unable to verify it. Though all would be fine if he just doesn't use magic, he was trained to use it even unconsciously, and doesn't have the will to forego using something as handy as that. He then lets out a deep sigh, recalling the glowing orb and turning on the lights like a normal person. Leaving the research of magic, items, and status for later, he decides to focus on how he should hide this fact from others. As he changes, quickly revealing his now muscular torso, his sister Ayumi knocks on his door, and enters to tell him that she is hungry without waiting for a reply. She tells him that his atmosphere feels different, wondering if he's on drugs, while he nervously covers himself and hurries her outside, telling her to wait until he prepares a meal, completely unsure of his ability to hide his changes. The next day, he takes a day off classes and heads into a forest in Okutama Mountain to test his magic and item box without any disturbances. He notes that he doesn't feel tired at all even after climbing the mountain at a brisk pace, noting that his body has also changed during his time in the other world, and he inadvertently makes a huge hole in the ground by stomping. He frantically tries to cover it up with magic, but in his desperation only succeeds in making yet another hole, and begins to question his humanity. He then stands before some boulders and resumes his test, easily blasting them to rubble with Fire Arrow, Ice Lance, and Water Bullet, and sighing at his destructive power. Though he would have been disappointed if he couldn't use the magic he trained so hard to master, the test exceeded his expectations by far. He then opens his item box and pulls out a sword, noting that he can use it just as before, but he doesn't think he will use it there. He then pictures himself fully clad in items from the other world in the street, finding it cringy, but he believes he might process the gems, ore, and coins with earth magic and sell them over time to make a few billion, his mouth watering at the thought. He then swishes the thought away, reminding himself that he wasn't there for that, and finally uses Summon, and attempts to conjure Kagero the Shadow Wolf to no avail. Even though he didn't believe that would work, he blushes at the embarrassing situation, and even the thought of being seen doing that. Suddenly, the air ripples, and the Shadow Wolf emerges from the magic circle, dashing toward the boy and gleefully licking him, having reunited with his master. Yuya is surprised that he succeeded and notes that the Shadow Wolf is a strong, intelligent, mythical creature that can hide in shadow. He recalls that he found Kagero in the Demon King's dungeon and made him his familiar after defeating the foe, and apologizes to the wolf for calling him out so suddenly, explaining that he summoned him to test if he could. Kagero is offended by this and for Yuya forgetting about him while in the other world, and is annoyed at being sent back so quickly. Having ended the test, the boy decides to go for lunch and buy some clothes. After gorging himself on KXC fried chicken, he notes that he has spent a lot of money on food. Noticing a lottery booth, he buys a 10 scratch and asks to choose one himself. Using appraisal, he can see the true value of the tickets before scratching them, and he uses that skill to select the best one, being called lucky by the vendor. Heading off with his newfound wealth, he suddenly begins to wonder if what he did isn't akin to shoplifting on easy mode, and begins to feel anxious and guilty at having that money, promising to never do it again. He is pulled from his thoughts by the sight of Akane and another girl named Nana being pestered by other boys. As he heads there, the girls' faces light up, and Akane chastises him for being late. The leader of the boys confronts Yuya, but the former hero can easily see that they have an extremely low status, and he might seriously harm them. Stepping forward, he pulls a coin out from his wallet and tells them to look, before effortlessly bending it with his fingers and handing it to them, politely asking them to let them go. Terrified, the boys apologize and hurry away. And while Nana is delighted, Akane glares at him with suspicion and asks what he did, unwilling to accept his explanation that they just talked it out and demanding more details. He then lies, stating that he told them the name of an infamous acquaintance of his, and she reluctantly lets the matter go. He then explains that he's there to buy clothes since some of his didn't fit anymore, and the girls offer to help him choose if he treats them to some drinks. He agrees and the group goes on a shopping spree, getting drinks and even dinner, leaving Yuya's wallet dry. He is glad that he used his ill-begotten money well, deciding to leave the rest in a donation box to soothe his conscience. As they're about to head back, however, they see a car accident take place before their very eyes. Looking at the car crash, they see an unconscious girl laying on the street. Yuya quickly tells Nana and Ayumi to call for the police and an ambulance, and Akane to check on the passengers in the car, before heading to the crash victim to check on her himself. He uses inhibit perception so that people not actively looking for him have a harder time noting his presence. And annoyed at noticing people in the crowd taking pictures rather than calling for help, fries their cell phones with Spark. Seeing that the unconscious girl is still breathing, he senses that she has organ damage and a skull fracture, but her brain is undamaged. Realizing that he can do this, he uses Heal to partially heal the girl without arousing suspicions. The girl then begins to stir, and he reassures her, telling her not to move while an ambulance arrives. He hears Nana looking for him, and after he dispels inhibit perception, the girl tells him that the ambulance is on the way, and agrees to watch the girl until it arrives. Yuya then wonders where Akane went, and he turns to see her lambasting the absent-minded driver for provoking the accident, and not even calling for an ambulance. Furious at his attitude, the boy heads there and snatches the man by his throat, hoisting him up and coldly asking if he has anything else to say as he continues to tighten his grip. Yuya is pulled from his enraged trance by Akane, who grabs his arm and presses her body against him, causing him to let go. As the man coughs on the ground, the ambulance arrives to carry the girl to a hospital, and Yuya gives his statement to the police. Akane laments that the dinner ended with such an incident, just wanting to go home and soak, and Yuya bids them farewell as he gets on his bike with his sister. Before he leaves, Akane calls out to him and seems to want to say something, but changes her mind and just bids him farewell. As he departs, Nana asks if she's okay with that, and the girl replies asking if she saw the light that appeared when Yuya checked on the accident victim. Nana replies that she didn't see Yuya doing that, attributing it to the crowd present, but notes that he was really cool, causing Akane to blush uncomfortably. She then tells her that she saw her hugging him, expecting to hear her thoughts on him that night, and an embarrassed Akane tries to excuse herself, stating that she wasn't hugging him, to no avail. 2 days later, Yuya heads to his part-time job wearing an impossibly tight shirt and fearing it might burst. The girl in the accident wasn't hurt too badly and didn't have to stay in the hospital, but had to rest for a week before returning to school. The driver, on the other hand, only had his license suspended since he wasn't drunk, but the boy put a curse he learned in the Demon Lord's library on him so he would get diarrhea every time he got aroused until he dispelled it. As he enters the restaurant, he is greeted by the manager named Mizukari, who notes that he is early and praises him for his diligence, handing the dining area to him. Having returned after 3 years and finding time on Earth hadn't moved at all, he is not sure he can work properly. He suddenly notices the manager looking at him with lustful eyes and asking why he is half naked, upon which he apologizes and asks for a shirt in another size since his old one doesn't fit. She hurriedly heads to a locker and clumsily tries to pull out a shirt while inwardly wondering if Yuya was always that ripped. The boy wasn't expecting someone as pretty as Mizukari to be flustered, and feeling embarrassed resolves that showing her his bare chest is off limits. Dressed in his new shirt and uniform, the boy heads to the dining area and diligently serves the customers, causing a coworker named Domori to note the situation to the enthralled manager. Yuya notes that despite his uncertainty, he was able to do everything well still, attributing it to his stronger body and noting how fun it is to serve customers. He is pulled from his thoughts by Domori asking some customers to lower their voices as to not bother other customers. As the man replies rudely to the embarrassed waiter, he calmly approaches and asks him to leave if he won't comply. The man then insults him as well and tells him that customers are kings, to which Yuya replies with a witty insult and another polite request for them to leave. The outraged customers then violently stand up, but are soon overwhelmed by Yuya's imposing presence, and cower, as he kindly asks them to pay their tab and leave, immediately complying. Inwardly, the boy recalls that something like that happened a few days prior, realizing he inadvertently used magic. Mizukari worriedly asks him if he's okay, tearfully apologizing for not stepping up in his stead, but he reassures her and tells her that he got wet and needs to go clean up. She misunderstands this, believing he wet himself, and the frantic boy tells her that's not the case, while Domori points out the puddle of water she's about to clean up, believing it to be his. Yuya notes that his abilities and powers have proven helpful, but using magic inadvertently can lead to embarrassing or problematic situations, and that living in this world has been hurting him mentally. Meanwhile, in the depths of a mountain, a dragon awakens, and refers to the unassuming boy as Master. Yuya is now back on his everyday routine of working and studying. Alone in his room, he gazes at the holy sword he was granted by the king and wonders what to do with it, since he forgot to give it back before leaving the world. He deduces that the other world should be safe for a while with the defeat of the Demon King and the evil god, but there still should be some hardier demons about, and the sword wouldn't be of any use to him in Japan, so he should return it. With this in mind, he heads to the woods and notes that there's a way to give it back, though he is not sure she is up to it. Finding a suitable spot, he recalls how he used summoning magic to conjure the Shadow Wolf in his room, and was able to send it back to the other world after dismissing it. He believes that if he sent the familiar back with the holy sword, he should be able to return it to the kingdom, and hoping she will do it if he asks nicely, he uses his powers to summon Raylia. The air swirls as the spell begins to work and the huge black dragon appears in front of the boy. He finds this amazing, not having seen her in a while, and apologizes for calling her so suddenly. The creature recognizes him, wondering if something went wrong, since she believed he had returned to his world. She is astonished to hear that they are in his world, noting that she didn't believe he would be able to summon her to another world with his magic, but soon gets to the point. She asks what he needs, noting that he didn't summon her for a friendly reunion, though she wouldn't mind if that was the case. The boy then confirms this, and nervously asks her to return an item to the royal palace, while inwardly noting that Raylia usually avoids contact with people and wouldn't want to visit the palace. He recalls that she became his familiar, so exchanging information would be more efficient, so they could use the summoning spell to their mutual benefit, which is why he's making a request instead of giving an order. The dragon replies that she doesn't mind the request if it comes from him, but wants something of his in return as well, telling him that she wishes to see the fabled world he came from for herself. He agrees, but points out that she can't tour the land looking like a dragon, so Raylia transforms into a beautiful woman with an ample bosom. The flustered boy tells her that shape will do, warning her not to speak to anyone about the other world, since people from Japan don't know of the other world's existence. She is surprised to see a motorcycle and thrilled to travel along the smooth and comfortable roads of that world, pressing her chest against him as she enjoys the ride. The dragon notes how capable otherworlders are, and Yuya explains that they make up for their lack of magic with advanced science, confessing that he couldn't wrap his head around magic either while in the other world. Raylia concedes this, and finds the food of this world exquisite, half-seriously suggesting that she would lay waste to an entire country for the sake of a parfait. When Yuya points out that he is a penniless student, she suggests that he sell one of her scales or nails, becoming frustrated when she learns that he can't sell them in that world and saddened at the prospect of not getting any more dessert. The angry Yuya then drags her outside, telling her that he has classes in the afternoon, and much to his surprise, she declares that she will go with him there. She then suggests that if she isn't allowed, she will just continue to explore the city, but fearing she will bankrupt him over ordering desserts, Yuya agrees that she tag along. Once in the university, the dragon comments on the size of the building, surprised to learn it can hold a whole town's worth of students. A receptionist asks them for their IDs, and although Yuya panics, Raylia hands the woman a guild card from the other world, which she accepts without questions. The surprised boy whispers that he didn't know that guild cards were accepted in this world, but the dragon merely replies that she used magic to show the receptionist what she wanted to see. Yuya praises her for her quick thinking and pins a visitor's pass on her, and as he's about to show her around, he is greeted by Akane. The girl smiles coldly while asking who the woman with him might be, sending shivers down the boy's spine. Yuya is terrified by Akane's question, but Raylia unassumingly calls him Master, and asks him to introduce them, causing the girl to become even more terrifying. Quick on his feet, the boy states the dragon is named Raylia, and is an acquaintance of his father, calling him Master because she doesn't fully master the Japanese language. Akane then steps forward and greets Raylia, and is shocked to learn that Yuya spoke of her often. She goes on to state that the boy stated that he had a regrettably inseparable bond with her since middle school, and she was bad company, which Akane doesn't take very well. A frightened Yuya attempts to make a run for it heading to class, but the girl grabs him by the shoulder and asks to tag along, already knowing which classes he was taking. She then gives Raylia a tour of the university, not letting her speak to Yuya for a second. The boy is pulled from his thoughts by the arrival of a fellow classmate named Akio, who asks him about the beautiful dragon, suggesting they should know each other better. Yuya attempts to shut him down, but to no avail. The third-year law student Akio has been his senpai in the touring circle, and spends all his time riding around having some dubious achievements, such as being the fastest guy to have to repeat a year, which he reminds the older boy. The dragon and Akane then approach them, and Yuya introduces his senpai as a seemingly shallow but nice guy. Not wasting a second, Akio begins flirting with the girl, stating she can't be compared to anyone, until Akane coldly asks who he's comparing her to. Another boy named Ijima from the rugby club then attempts to join the conversation, but Akio rudely tells him to stay away from Raylia, causing the boy to threaten to fight right there. Yuya attempts to defuse the situation and gets caught by the collar by Ijima, who tells him to go. But far from being threatened, the boy compares him to a cute hamster defending his territory. Raylia then intercedes and insults the boy, before grabbing his face and lifting him in the air, coldly asking what he intends to do with her master, before letting him down with a warning, sounding like a recurring mid-boss. Yuya then approaches the older boy to check on his injury and coldly warns him to not get cocky, causing him to scurry away. Akane then asks what happened and who Raylia really is, to which he replies that she is stronger than most people. He then bids Akio farewell and scurries off with the girls as he desperately tries to get Raylia's number. Yuya had hoped to introduce Raylia to Japan and then return the Holy Sword, but he knew that it would turn out like this. Resigned, he asks the dragon to enter his house, but she asks if she's allowed, stating that she would like to be given the chance to greet his family, whispering that if anything happens, she will use her magic to set things right. As he opens the door, he is shocked to see Ayumi holding a welcoming banner to greet Raylia, and she tells him that she is text buddies with Akane, and she also warned her of the visit. As the scared boy wonders why she would do that, his sister reveals that she also told their mother that they would be having a guest over. Yuya introduces the dragon to his mother, who serves them a meal that Raylia finds delicious, as well as some ice cream. Ayumi then leads her to a bath where the three girls bathe together and play around, while Yuya hears everything with some embarrassment. Later that night, the boy falls exhausted in his bed after making it through the day, and wonders if Raylia is doing okay with the girls. In the other room, Akane asks her directly about her relationship with Yuya. She replies that they have a bond where their souls are linked to each other, but it does not mean that they're romantically involved. And as Akane begins to jump with joy, she clarifies that she understands his appeal as a man, causing her to shiver. Ayumi asks her if she likes her brother, and after some pause, states that she does like him, but does not know what she specifically thinks of him. Ayumi then asks Akane if Raylia is her rival, but before she can answer, the dragon returns the question and asks about her relationship with Yuya. The girl ambiguously replies that they're friends, and is aghast when Raylia asks if they've slept together, muttering some inaudible confessions but unable to answer out loud. Ayumi then declares that she will ascertain what kind of person Raylia is, and she playfully tells the girls to be gentle with her before smiling. In the other room, Yuya attempts to listen through the wall and worries that Raylia might have let something slip, being unable to sleep due to this fear. He then opens the door to Ayumi's room to check on them, but the girls kick him out in unison before slamming the door shut. Huddling in his bed, the boy diverts his thoughts towards returning the holy sword. Raylia recalls how she met Yuya. It felt like someone was calling out to her in her cave. Since it was quite rare for someone to visit the place, it was common for her to spend time dozing off without doing anything. Up until 2 years prior, time was passing slowly, and as things were finally returning to that state, she was feeling bored and gloomy. She had left the cave 2 years prior and returned only 2 months ago. But to such a long-lived creature, that time span felt like a short dream. It all started when Yuya and his party approached her while she was dozing off in her cave. She disliked people for their greed and their propensity for conflict and strife, so she warned the young people to depart, else they should die. She didn't hold a grudge against them, but if they intend to disrupt her tranquility, there would be no reason to hesitate. Undaunted, Yuya approached her and asked her to lend them her power to protect their country, as well as the people of the land from the Demon King. Towering above them, she refused, since she considered both humans and demonkin as people, and had no intention of intervening in their disputes. Undaunted once again, Yuya offers to make a bet, telling her to assign him with any task that wasn't impossible or too long, allowing her to do whatever she wants with him if she wins, but requesting her to lend her power if he prevails. The whole cave rumbled as Raylia laughed at this. She asked what his objective was with this, and he replied that he wants to go back to his old world after being summoned by Valenus. The dragon pointed out that he is an outsider to that world's troubles, wondering why he wouldn't leave it be, since there were many other ways for him to return. Yuya admitted that he had some complaints for Valenus, but wouldn't be able to go home with a smile if he just abandoned the people he met in Wilterius. After some thought, the dragon agreed, and asked him to show her his strength by bending her to his will by force, so she would recognize him as her master and lend him her power. Tia begged the boy to suggest a different task, but he drew his sword and asked the dragon to go easy on him. Raylia and Yuya then fought, and even if she didn't like people, she couldn't bring herself to dislike him when he stared at her so straightforwardly. Despite having no success, the boy continued to attack relentlessly past the point of exhaustion, until she conceded him victory, recognizing him as her temporary master. Despite being given the nearly impossible task of making a dragon submit by force, he disregarded the difference in power between them and never gave up, with his willpower growing as his swordsmanship and magic grew much more vigorous. She probably wanted to see where he would end up, or maybe she sensed his fragility, but either way she wondered what he would show her in the future. Back in the present day, Raylia thanked Akane and Ayumi for the delightful time they spent together, and the boy was surprised that she managed to get through without any problems. The goodbyes between them are just pretense, however, since she can't go back to the other world unless he returns her. So they decide to meet up at the mountain where he summoned her and told her to not stop by any restaurants on the way. He tells her to stay safe, and the dragon steps forward and kisses him on the lips while smiling, leaving the boy flustered and shooting a grin at Akane before departing merrily. Yuya is left confused as to why she kissed him, but Akane eerily notes how happy he seems, so he opts to flee for his own safety when the girl chases him. Back in the other world, Raylia soars over the woods in her dragon form, as she heads back to the royal capital to fulfill Yuya's request, laughing as she remembers their last encounter. A few minutes before her return, the boy recalled their kiss and angrily asked why she kissed him, noting that Ayumi and Akane went full demon mode on him and chased him soon after. Confused, the dragon asked if he didn't like it, and though he started to reply, he eventually desisted in his attempt to explain himself and sighed, stating that it did not matter anymore. He then handed her a box full of parfaits, revealing that he bought them for her since she liked them so much. Overjoyed by the gift, she embraced him, pressing his face into her breasts and nearly suffocating him in the process. The surprised boy asked if she was trying to kill him, and she considered his reaction rude while jiggling her breasts. She then smiled, telling him that she must compensate him for this. He replied that there was no need, asking her to deliver the holy sword while pulling the item from his inventory box. He then told her that the box contained more desserts for Mel and the others as well, asking her to pass them on. She stored all the items in her own inventory box, jokingly suggesting that they might gossip about him over dessert, and as he proceeded to send her back, she asked him to summon her at least once a month. The boy admitted that he would miss her and told her that he would summon her again, much to her delight. In the capital, Princess Malthuria sits on her desk and sighs as she examines some documents. Stepping out onto a balcony, she relaxes in the cool breeze until she notices a shape approaching in the sky. After some time, she recognizes it as the Black Dragon, surprised to see her there. She lands in the palace courtyard and adopts her human form, with both the princess and Prince Leon rushing to greet her. She coldly tells the prince that she is there to fulfill a request from her master, but instantly lightens up when she sees Malthuria approaching, warmly greeting her. Cast aside, the prince leaves her younger sister in charge of the dragon's requests, jealous at her relationship with the creature, before quickly excusing himself in embarrassment. Mel then asks what happened since the dragon was supposed to return to the mountains, and she repeats that she is there upon Yuya's request before pulling out the holy sword from her inventory. She then tosses it at a surprised guard without a second thought, but the confused princess asks her to wait before leaving, as her statement sinks in. She asks if Raylia got to meet Yuya, and she reveals that she was summoned and he showed her around his world, which she found amazing. As the princess processes this information, the maid Eris appears with love-struck eyes and bows to the dragon, informing her that she has summoned Tia and suggesting that they sit and talk in the garden, with Raylia inviting Mel as well and revealing that she also has souvenirs. Tia is delighted to see her again and approaches her in a maid outfit. They warmly greet each other before turning to see the princess still staring blankly. Eris then approaches her and, stating that it will take some time for her to come back by herself, pulls out a slipper and smacks her on the back of the head. The princess then snaps out of it in a state of confusion, wondering what happened, and also wondering about the slipper while noticing that her head hurts. But the maid evades the question. Mel then notices Raylia and recalls what she said about meeting Yuya, which surprises Tia. The dragon promises to tell them the details as she pulls the dessert box from her inventory, with the beastkin and princess becoming entranced at the sight of the parfaits. As the girls marvel at the treat, Raylia tells them to dig in. They find it delicious, and Eris wonders if it could be reproduced in the kingdom. And while Mel does mention that there are desserts for her brother and father, they decide to eat them since the two are busy. The princess finds it hard to believe that Yuya could summon the dragon from another world, though Tia wishes she was also bound to him by contract. Raylia notes that it should have been impossible, and it might be due to Yuya being unique or due to Valenus pulling some strings for some unknown purpose. She believes the goddess might be planning to use the boy for something again, but she is determined to prevent her from disrupting his peaceful life any further. Though she is not on the level of a god, she is still quite powerful, and she can tell if something happens to him due to their contract. Mel shyly asks if it would be possible for them to meet Yuya again, and the dragon replies that it is most likely. She explains that when a summoner summons a beast he is contracted with, there are cases when it is summoned together with other beasts that were with it at the moment of summoning, and Yuya promised to summon her once a month. Tia becomes excited at the prospect, and Mel nearly breaks out in tears of joy, becoming utterly flustered when Eris tells her that she will be able to see him again and trying to deny it. The maid then points out that she never mentioned Yuya, causing the princess to become embarrassed. Raylia then asks what was the point of denying it since everyone knows that she loves the boy. She denies it once again, but Eris points out to her that she spaces out and grins whenever his face comes across her mind, and she instantly gets flustered if his name comes up in conversation. Raylia then tells them that she will get Yuya to bring them with her once things calm down both for him and the kingdom, much to Tia's excitement. They then turn to see Malthuria having a breakdown as she realizes her true feelings for the boy, even despite her duties as a princess. Overwhelmed, she suffers a breakdown and faints, with Tia desperately trying to wake her up, while Aaron points out that teasing her will be worthwhile. Yuya is in dire need of money. Once, he was summoned to another world to be a hero and defeated the demon lord and the evil god. But now that he's returned to his world, he's in financial distress. He approaches his mother and hands her a necklace he made, lying and telling her that he learned to make it from the internet, and she is delighted by the present. After fighting for his life in the other world for 3 years, he has finally returned to Japan. Though he thought he would enjoy a fulfilling life upon his return, he soon remembered that in his world you need money for everything. His salary from his part-time job won't cut it and he needs to study for college. And even though he can use magic to easily make money with alchemy and the like, he doesn't want to do anything illegal, regretting the time that he did use it. After much consideration, he decided to resort to alchemy to make handcrafted accessories and sell them online using the gold and silver in his item box. He plans to be creative in using his magic, and recalling his mother has had troubles with stiff shoulders and back pain, he imbues the necklace with fatigue recovery. This should have an effect on the wearer, but as it relies on absorbing the magical power around it, the accessory won't be as potent as the original magic, though the pieces he makes for his family will have the proper imbue effect. Ayumi then returns home, and her mother happily shows her the necklace Yuya gave her, causing her to frantically ask for her own present. He calms her down, handing her a puppy necklace, and as he puts it on her, he tells her that he decided to make them and sell them online as a way to make some extra money. Examining the piece, she believes people would buy it for the right price, and offers to help, as the boy admits that he hasn't even made a page yet. He accepts, offering her a portion of the profits, and she enthusiastically jumps at the opportunity. His mother is happy about this, telling them not to forget about their studies, and asking Yuya to deliver bento to her office next week since she will be heading out earlier in the morning. The boy then thinks some more regarding his business. We are now at Tokyo General Hospital, where nurse Adachi Miyuki complains about how her stomach rumbles loudly whenever she's hungry, hoping no one heard her. When Yuya approaches from behind and greets her, the startled nurse greets the boy, used to him delivering bento to his mother and telling him that she got called to the medical office and will be back shortly. She then shyly asks if he made some extra, and he tells her that he made enough simple dishes for 5 people, telling her to enjoy it together. Another nurse named Takahashi Kyoko then approaches after hearing Miyuki praise the boy's homemade cooking, and is soon joined by another hungry nurse named Ayoma Ran. Miyuki then tells them that they will eat once Yuya's mother returns, and the boy then displays some of his homemade accessories for them to admire, asking for their opinion. They find them really cute, and Ran recalls his mother was bragging about her necklace the other day. Kyoko praises Yuya's skills, noting that they don't look homemade, and he tells her to take one that is to her liking. Yuya then turns to notice a girl watching him from the doorway, and she immediately runs away when their eyes meet. As the other girls select their accessories, Miyuki approaches the boy and asks what's wrong. As he mentions the girl, she reveals that she was transferred from pediatrics to their ward due to some circumstances, and Ran tells him her name is Mia and she is 10 years old, making it dangerous for her to wander around alone, heading off to look for her. Sometime later, Yuya runs into Mia sitting on a bench outside the hospital, greeting her and telling her that the nurses are looking for her. The girl asks who he is, and he reveals he's the son of a nurse, and they actually met at the nurse's station, suggesting she go back inside. She vehemently refuses and pouts, so in order to cheer her up, he offers to show her something interesting if she returns to her room afterwards. She agrees after some hesitation, and he then tells her to look at the tip of his finger as he produces several fireballs that light up the night, causing them to disappear again with a snap. Mia is amazed by this, and he refuses to explain how he did it, telling her it's a secret, being unable to tell her that it is real magic. The girl wants to see more tricks, but he decides to end it there due to it being late, telling her that he will show her something even more amazing if she listens to the nurses from now on. She asks him to promise it, and he agrees, making a pinky promise with the little girl. Some days later, Yuya returns to the hospital. The girls are startled by his presence, telling him that he came at the right time, and frantically asking what's going on with the accessories he brought the other day, asking if he made them himself. The boy is petrified, inwardly wondering if something bad happened because he used material from the other world, or because he messed up the imbuements. Instead, the overjoyed girls tell him that they've been feeling energetic and their back pain is gone. One even states that her skin feels smoother. Yuya is glad to hear that and tells them that he made the accessories from regular silver and a power crystal. They doubt that crystals have that kind of effect, and one even suggests that Yuya might be the one with supernatural powers. Nervous, he jokes that he wished that each piece would bring fortune to its wearer while he crafted them, before asking the nurses for Mia's room. Recalling he brought her back, they ask if he has something to do with her, and he tells them of their promise. Realizing that to be the reason the girl has become so obedient, they thank him for the intervention. Yuya then asks them why she got transferred from pediatrics to the surgical ward, and though they won't tell him about her condition, they reveal that she got into a fight with another kid, and fearing that staying around each other would wear on her mental health, she was transferred to the other ward. Miyuki then gets called away and Yuya is left alone. As he walks towards Mia's room, he sees a young boy standing in the doorway, startling him when he asks if he has some business with Mia. He tries to flee, but Yuya catches him and lifts him under his arm, heading to a waiting room to have a little chat. Offering him some water, he repeats his question, becoming offended when the kid refers to him as an oldie, despite only being a college student. He correctly guesses that he is the boy that Mia got into a fight with, and he finally tells Yuya that his name is Ichinose Yu, admitting that he said some really bad things to the girl. From what he told, Mia's parents did not visit her often since they were very busy, so she would look enviously whenever another child's parents came to visit. On one such occasion, she angrily threw her teddy bear at Yu when his mother brought him a new manga, causing the boy to angrily declare that her parents won't come to visit her because of her attitude. His mother got really mad at him for that, and he felt sorry for what he did. And though he wanted to apologize, he got transferred before he had a chance. And though he knew where she was, he didn't have the courage to go. Offering to help him, Yuya lifts him up once more and carries him to Mia's room. Mia is reading in her bed, and her face brightens up when Yuya enters the room, but is surprised to see Yu with him. The former hero nudges the boy onwards, and after some hesitation, he apologizes for what he said, and the two quietly stare at each other. Mia's mother then enters the room, surprised to see Yuya and Yu there, and the college student introduces himself and the younger boy, explaining that the latter wanted to apologize and he went to fulfill his promise. The mother reveals that since the fight at the pediatrics started with Mia throwing things at him, she thought of going to his place to apologize, nodding at her daughter to apologize to the boy in turn. With the matter settled, the woman introduces herself as Uno Ayako, and Mia urges Yuya to show her the trick. The boy tells Yu and Uno to stay as well, and once they're all seated, he proceeds to generate and manipulate fireballs in the room, to everyone's astonishment. He then pours a bottle of water into a bowl and, scooping some up, proceeds to make it float and splash Yu, causing the girls to giggle. He then makes flying origami cranes and then asks Mia what her favorite animal is. The girl then happily declares it to be the giant isopod, but the surprised boy asks her to think of another animal, upon which she suggests a naked mole rat. Her mother tells her to choose a more normal animal, upon which she chooses a kitten. With this, Yuya rummages through his satchel and pulls a bead and a handkerchief, telling her to look as he performs a magic trick. He swaps the bead with an item in his inventory box, pulling the handkerchief away to reveal a kitten necklace. Mia finds it amazing, and Yuya gifts her the accessory before doing the same trick with Yu and handing him a pigeon necklace. He does the same with Mia's mother, and though she is reluctant at accepting something so valuable for free, the boy reassures her that it didn't cost that much, suggesting that she wear the necklace since it matches with Mia's. The girl is excited at the offer, and seeing her daughter's joyful face, Uno agrees as well. Yuya had made those accessories as a present for Mia in the first place, imbuing them with the power to ward off any incoming ailments, and intending for her and her mother to wear matching accessories so she won't feel quite as lonely as before. Leaving the room, Uno thanks Yuya for what he did, noting that his magic show was far more impressive than others she has seen. Impressive enough for him to be the real deal. He brushes it off while inwardly wondering if he used far more magic in front of people than he did before, and the mother notes that it is the first time since Mia got sick that he saw her having so much fun. Yuya notes that Uno also seems better since the fatigue recovery magic he placed on the room took effect, making her feel more energetic. Though some might consider using magic in the modern world as cheating, Yuya will be really happy if his power can be of some help to others. He hopes that this will help her become healthier, and as they leave, Uno asks him to visit Mia after her surgery, to which he agrees. Elsewhere, armed men finish their preparations to perform a hit on an ambassador, having amassed a huge arsenal. One of them confirms the diplomat's schedule continues as planned, while another reveals that it has taken more effort than they anticipated for a country supposedly withered by peace. Their leader warns that their mission is to have a negotiation, since the ambassador's country has many allies in Africa and the Middle East, warning his subordinates to avoid unnecessary deaths. The men seem undaunted by this warning, considering they can off anyone they deem necessary and believing that dead cultists are of no consequence to them. The leader then declares that the mission will start at 11 p.m. the next day, and will target the ambassador and officials of the Japanese government. After much hard work, a boy proudly declares that his creation is finished. Yuya tries on the henshin hero costume the boy made, and the latter notes how good it looks. Yuya is wearing it as a part-time cosplay job, and the boy notes that it took him some time to adjust the suit due to his body shape changing so much, noting that his movements look cooler than before. He also enthusiastically insists that Yuya must do rather embarrassing rider kicks to get attention. The boy is Saito Yosuke, a tokusatsu otaku and science major in the same university as Yuya, who's been employing him to be his cosplayer in the big summer/winter cosplay event that is held each year. Being really excited, he hands the former hero the costume, promising a good pay. Yuya is strapped for cash after Rayleigh's visit and Ayumi and Akane demanding equal treatment, and he also has to save up for the motorcycle training camp at the start of the summer vacation, so his dignity must take a hit from the embarrassment and cringe. While they rest, Yuya turns on the television, and Saito asks him about Raylia after hearing about it from Ayumi. Yuya then tells him that his sister went with Akane to a Persian art exhibition. Right on cue, the news reporter informs that there was an explosion at a museum, and multiple armed foreigners had stormed the museum, taking the ambassador and several government officials as hostages, before barricading themselves in the building. Saito realizes that this is the museum where the art exhibition was taking place, and after unsuccessfully trying to call his sister, Yuya sees the news informing that citizens inside the museum were taken hostage. Fearing the worst, the former hero uses magic to confirm their position, determined to save them if necessary, but unwilling to reveal his powers. Realizing he will need a disguise, he uses magic to put his friend to sleep so he can borrow the costume. At the museum, the terrorists warn everyone to remain still. Ayumi and Akane are among the crowd, and the latter comforts the former, stating that help will arrive soon, inwardly wishing Yuya were there despite believing he wouldn't be able to do much. Meanwhile, the former hero flies to the museum, unable to use teleportation magic since he can only do that to previously marked locations, and hiding his presence with his inhibit perception magic, and hiding his identity with his disguise. Soaring above the museum, he senses the location of everyone in the building, and identifies Ayumi thanks to her magical necklace, considering his next move. Inhibit perception would not work against the alert terrorists, and he never learned covert skills in the other world since they were reserved for spies and criminals, not a hero like himself. Without any other choice, he opts to use brute force. He immediately searches for bombs, finding one in the park and covering it with a time barrier to prevent its detonation, while several onlookers call the police on him. Returning to the skies, he pinpoints the location of the armed terrorists and the mass of hostages. He then begins his assault, dispatching one of the guards at the entrance and zapping him out of action. Now inside the building, he casts soundproof barrier on every floor to defeat his opponents piecemeal, dealing with the second thug and dragging him outside. With 4 to go, he ventures in once again, only to notice a terrorist aiming at a kid trying to protect his mother. The nervous terrorist fires on the child, only for his bullets to be deflected by a force field. Yuya then bends his rifle's barrel and knocks him unconscious, patting the boy's head and saying some reassuring words. The hostages are confused at seeing a costumed hero before them, and Yuya informs them that he has cleared the way for them to leave the building. Waving them goodbye, he heads in for the finale. 3 terrorists are left, guarding around 100 hostages, including the ambassador. Considering it reckless of them to storm that huge facility with so few men, he assumes that they must have something up their sleeve, finding a hostage right next to the thugs and a mysterious duffel bag that he detects is not a bomb. Unable to wait any longer, he charges in. The first terrorist is caught off guard as Yuya uses his powers to disarm his 2 companions, and proceeds to knock him out with a rider kick. The other thugs are shocked to find their weapons powerless, and though one of them manages to dodge his attack, the other is struck to the floor. The last terrorist then pulls out a detonator and presses it to no avail, looking at it in confusion before being zapped into submission. Yuya then checks on the ambassador, lowering the barrier that he set around him, as the bodyguards rush to guard him. He informs that he has dealt with the terrorists and evacuated the other hostages, recommending they all do the same, as he confirms that Akane and Ayumi are alright. His sister looks at him with suspicion, but reassures himself believing his suit protects his identity. As the last of the hostages exit the building, fully armored special policemen barge in, asking if he was the one who knocked the terrorists out. Yuya refuses to reveal his identity and warns them about the 2 bombs he secured before materializing them into his hands. He then reassures the police as they hide behind their shields, explaining that he covered them with a barrier and destroyed the trigger, asking where he can leave them. The confused police tell him to wait. Sometime later, they thank Yuya for his cooperation and ask for him to come with them to the police office. He excuses himself, disappearing before the astonished men and leaving them with the mess of reporting that. He materializes in Saito's house, having left a magic circle there as a precaution. Finding his friend sound asleep, he checks his suit for damage and hurries to return everything back to how it was, feeling a bit shy but glad about being able to use the costume to head to the museum. This statement about his shyness contrasts with his attitude while wearing the suit, and the young man wonders if the use of magic won't be another black spot in his history, deciding to head home as the news reports on what transpired. Tia asks Maltheria to be allowed to take part in the battle, but the latter refuses, stating that the fight does not involve her. Instead, the princess sends her off to find Raylia, and the beastkin agrees for the sake of the country and the people she cares about. In Japan, Ayumi insistently knocks on Yuya's door to wake him up. He reluctantly rises from his bed, noting that having an embarrassing past is tough. The reason for his sorry mental state is the escapade with the hero costume. Though he thought it would end there, he was completely wrong. The media soon became flooded with stories about the mysterious hero, and since the TV was usually left on in his home in the background, he was doomed to watch the embarrassing stories and keep his poker face. Each time he saw it, he thought about the cheesy hero poses he adopted, wishing he could hide in a hole until this all blew over. A week after the event, Yuya runs into his sister in the living room. She sees the costumed hero on TV and notes that he looks really similar to Yuya. She asks the startled boy if he is the hero, which he denies, stating that he was at Saito's place and there was no way he could magically fly to the museum. She then teases him, stating that he still has a decade to go before he becomes a wizard, also stating that he is single. He then sees an alarm on his phone letting him know that it's been about a month since Raylia was last summoned. He thinks about calling her, and when his sister asks if he has something to do, he tells her that Raylia is coming again. Unamused, she asks if she will be staying there again, and Yuya soon realizes that he stepped on a landmine. Sometime later, Raylia notes how he kept his promise as he summoned her once more. He asks if she delivered the sword, which she confirms, as Tia steps forward and embraces him, awkwardly smelling the confused young man. The dragon then recounts that after she returned the holy sword, she told Mel and Tia about their encounter, and the beastkin went to her nest, adamant about seeing him. Yuya then wonders what to do, knowing that if Tia stays too long, it will cause a few issues. She shyly asks if she can't stay, but he points out that her ears and tail would cause a huge uproar in the world without beastkin, and they would need to register her. Though she could stay in their house, he notes that they can't just lock her up in there forever. So Raylia reveals that she can solve that issue by using her magic to change her appearance. Tia states that she does not want to cause trouble to Yuya and is already happy that she got to see him again. Hearing this, the former hero asks the dragon to hide the beastkin's ears and tail and adopt a human form herself, much to Tia's delight. Raylia then adopts her human form and prepares to use her magic on the beastkin, warning that it might feel strange at first. Using her powers, she causes her animal ears and tail to vanish, leaving Tia looking like a normal girl. She touches her rounded ears and the place where her tail used to be with surprise, happily noting that she has the same ears as Yuya. Staring intently at the hole in her clothes where her tail used to be, Yuya states that they should get her new clothes. Tia enjoys her first car ride, loving how smoothly it travels down the road, while Raylia notes how different it is to riding a bike, and Yuya contrasts it with riding a carriage in the other world. At a clothes store, the beastkin tries on some new clothes, and Yuya notes that she looks good in them. She doubts that they will protect her due to the fabric being so thin, but nonetheless is happy to wear a dress from the hero's world, clinging on to him while Raylia looks on with jealousy. They then continue to tour the mall, stopping to eat some parfaits before heading back to Yuya's home. The young man then goes over the fake story that they have to stick to in order to justify them staying with him, also keeping Raylia's magic as a last resort if anyone gets suspicious. He is nonetheless nervous, fearing that things will go awry, but tries to reassure himself before entering the house. As he opens the door, he is surprised to see his stern-faced sister waiting for him, looking past him in shock at finding him accompanied by two beautiful girls, and fearing he might have kidnapped them, before welcoming them in. Tia wonders who she is, and Yuya tells her that it's his sister, and to leave her alone for the time being. He then dodges Ayumi's questions and looks on as the two otherworlders talk with her. Later that night, as he washes the dishes, Yuya sighs in relief at having gotten past to dinner without any incident, despite Ayumi still pouting. Raylia and Tia then emerge from the bath, thanking him for the treat, and he offers them some tea as his sister goes to bathe in turn. Once they're alone, Yuya bluntly asks them about the reason Tia arrived with Raylia, suspecting there is something more aside from her desire to visit Earth. The beastkin begins to falter, falling into utter shock when he asks, "Where's Mel?" and noting that she wouldn't go to Raylia without telling her. He presses for an answer, wondering if there's something that they can't tell him. After a pause, Raylia reluctantly admits that Tia is there because Malthuria told her to be, because she didn't want Tia to die. Yuya is puzzled by the answer and turns utterly livid when Tia reveals that the Vel's Empire declared war on the Alianus Kingdom. The Empire lies west of the kingdom, and despite being relatively new, boasts a strong military. Ever since the Demon Lord expanded its territory, the Empire has been greedy for more land, and has often clashed with the neighboring countries, but were nonetheless cooperative in the war against the demons that ended recently. As Tia recounts, the Empire invaded the kingdom with 60,000 troops 20 days prior, and quickly seized numerous villages and cities. Alianus refused to surrender and asked for help from the neighboring countries, but due to the attrition caused by the war against the demons, they couldn't muster a force strong enough to halt the Empire's advance. The Irvinia Empire and the Eastern Alliance of these city-states recommended the kingdom to evacuate, so Mel told Tia to flee to Raylia. Yuya notes that it's too early after the Demon War for the Empire to declare war again, since the war ravaged the continent. He reckons that if they were able to launch an offensive 20 days prior, they began preparing for it immediately after the war concluded, or were deliberately aiming for that timing and conserved their strength while fighting demons, despite humanity's survival being at stake. He is enraged by this thought, to the point that Raylia has to vehemently tell him to calm down, and after he apologizes, Tia notes that they decided not to tell him about the subject so as to not upset him. Turning to the dragon, he asks if she can bring him back to Versteria, and upon her blunt refusal, he states that he was merely asking if it was possible, not asking for a ride. Raylia then asks what he plans to do after she answers, noting that the situation is different from before, since this is a fight between humans and he shouldn't get involved. She understands his concern for Mel and the others, but she advises him to keep away from it. Their conversation is cut short when Ayumi enters the room asking if they were fighting, and though Yuya reassures her and offers her some tea, Raylia goes off book, stating that he is refusing to sleep with her. His sister then calls the shocked Yuya a wimpy virgin, and Tia joins in. As the girls engage in girl talk, the former hero lies in his bed thinking about the situation. He admits that the war between humans had nothing to do with an outsider like him, but he still cannot get it off of his mind, and is also hesitant about throwing away the life he had just reclaimed in Japan if he were to return. Hating his hesitancy, he still believes there's a way to go back to the other world, correctly deducing that Tia was able to come because she was in contact with Raylia when being summoned, believing it could be replicated in his case. The problem, however, lies in how to send someone back from his side. The previous time he was sent over by the goddess, who promptly returned him to Japan once his mission was done, but he wouldn't be able to rely on her on this occasion. He has an untested idea how to do it on his own, but if it works, he will have to prepare himself for what comes next. Yuya is having a wonderful time playing in the park with Akane's dog, Elizabeth. While the girl notes how energetic he is even in the morning, he decided to accompany the girl for a morning stroll. And though he has often met her and her dog while doing morning training, this time he has a clear goal. Akane jealously asks him if he will be okay with being with her while Raylia is in his house with his beloved sister, but he counters that Ayumi is showing them the city, while nervously playing with Elizabeth. The girl lets it go, since they will go to her house that day, and leaves to buy some drinks. As they are left alone, Yuya promises Elizabeth some jerky if she comes with him for a bit. Later that night, he meets with Raylia and Tia in the park. Once there, he announces that he plans to return to Versteria and intervene in the war. Though he admits Raylia is right and that he is an outsider, he still has many friends and people that he is indebted to in the kingdom, and whatever the Empire is planning, he cannot just leave them to fend for themselves. Raylia pauses before asking if he is serious, noting how much he sacrificed to return to Japan, and how he now plans to return to the battlefield, wondering how, if ever, he plans to return. Yuya replies back that he plans on returning after putting a quick end to the war, needing to be back for the university entrance examination next month, unable to stop the war in such a short time, but still hoping he can halt the Empire's invasion before then. Raylia notes his determination, offering to go in his stead and use her power to destroy the Empire's army. He thanks her but states that his return is due to his selfishness, and wants to get involved purely out of his own volition. The dragon then asks how he plans to return, and he recalls how Tia came to Japan because she was in contact with Raylia, deducing that he can just make a contract with an animal from Japan and summon it into the other world. He tried to make a pact with Elizabeth, having succeeded in summoning her and teleporting along with her. Raylia is unconvinced, and Tia steps forward, declaring that she just wants to stay beside Yuya. Despite having people she cares for in the other world, she would choose him over them. But if she is allowed to not give up on them, she wants to help everyone. The hero smiles at this, and after sighing, Raylia finally agrees to his plan, causing the Beastkin to embrace him. He deduces it is best to leave as soon as possible, choosing to leave immediately after telling his mother and sister that he will be away for a while. In the other world, the Arianis army is at camp out in the field with Prince Leon in command. He notes that they were able to predict the Empire's movements and set up an encirclement beforehand, when General Reagan enters the tent reporting that the enemy is gathering on the west side of the grassland, and is preparing to invade in a day or two. Now, Vice Captain Bruno Reg states the enemy at 80,000 strong, describing the force's composition. A knight then announces the arrival of General Vistus and Duke Rans from the Irvania Holy Empire, as well as a delegation from the Federation of City-States. The prince thanks them for coming, but Vistus merely states that if they don't stop the Empire, they will be next, and the delegates from the Federation agree with this, having brought whatever strength they could muster. Reagan believes the attack will start the next day, and plans to make a fighting withdrawal down a road whittling down the enemy force. The prince laments their numerical inferiority, fearing they will be surrounded. But General Vistus notes that it is too late to lament that, and that they can only win if each of their soldiers defeats 3 enemies. Court Mage Duke Rand suggests that an escape route be kept so Prince Leon can escape if the battle turns against them, since he must lead the nation in the future. The prince replies that the kingdom is in good hands with the king and Milthuria, and he's expecting another sibling, so he plans to fight to the very end with his men. Their conversation is cut short by a huge commotion outside. A soldier then hurriedly enters the tent warning of an incoming magical beast, causing everyone to stand and alert. Outside, no one can discern what approaches them, but as the prince scours the horizon, he is slowly able to make out the shape of a dragon. The soldiers begin to panic, but he looks in surprise as he recognizes Raylia. The black dragon lands just outside of the camp, and Leon hurries towards them, surprised to see Tia and Malthuria dismount from her. Looking in utter shock as Yuya charismatically announces that he has arrived in time. The hero has returned. Winding up time a little bit, Ayumi questions Yuya's motives for leaving with Raylia and Tia after they just arrived. His mother asks if it's something he cannot tell them at the moment, or that he can talk about once things settle down. He is actually going to the other world as reinforcements for the war against the Vel's empire, and the two visitors must return for the same reason. And though he wishes he could explain all that to his family, he believes it might be a bit too much, promising to explain later. His mother accepts this since he's not a child anymore, stating that as long as he does not shame the family, it's alright. The hero tells them that he will return in about a week so he can prepare for the exams the following month, and then he heads to the forest with Raylia and Tia. Once there, they successfully teleport to Raylia's cave in the other world, and Yuya tells the dragon that he plans on going back to the capital of the Arianis kingdom. She offers to take him there on her back, but the young man points out that it is a human war and dragons do not need to get involved in human conflicts. She merely replies that she would only be helping her master as obliged by contract, and may inadvertently hurt enemy troops in the process, so there would not be a problem. Yuya gladly accepts her help and mounts on her back with Tia, and the dragon teleports them all to a field within sight of the capital. Raylia then unfurls her wings and flies the remaining distance, soaring over the city and its inhabitants. As she lands on the castle courtyard, some guards rush to confront the intruders, becoming dumbfounded once they realize the hero has returned. Yuya asks to speak to the king, and the guards stand at attention and hurry to fulfill his request. Princess Malthuria rushes along the corridors of the palace with Eris in tow, her heart racing with anticipation of being reunited with Yuya. She knocks on the door and excitedly enters the room where he's waiting, embracing him in tears and hoping it's not a dream. The hero then starts to warn that if she keeps squeezing him that hard, her breasts will press against him. But her physiology makes the warning unnecessary, much to her annoyance. Standing behind her, Eris comments on how bold she was lunging like that, and Yuya greets the maid in turn. She returns the greeting, not having expected to see him again, and with eyes full of expectation, promptly asks him to do the deed with her that time, not minding if he takes the princess before her. Mel then starts to talk with Yuya when she is interrupted by a servant announcing that the king will receive them, and leaving the conversation for later, she leads them to the throne room. Once there, they are announced as they walk toward King Arius and Queen Lefia. Yuya kneels, but the queen bids him to rise, while the king states his pleasant surprise at seeing the hero, and asks for his reason for returning. Yuya explains that Tia went to his world, and learning of the situation, he decided to return with her to punish the invaders, planning to join the battle against the Empire. The crowd erupts in cheers at this, but just as the king is thanking him for his aid, the Minister of Domestic Affairs Belrius interjects. He is the second highest ranking official in the kingdom and enjoys the trust of the king, being an honest and earnest noble who has funded orphanages for the children orphaned by the war. Nonetheless, he is always opposed to the idea of involving an otherworlder like Yuya with the kingdom's affairs, which often led to clashes between them. As he notes inwardly that he seems different, Belrius states his case, declaring that they had no choice but to accept Yuya in the war against the evil god due to the goddess's intervention. But this time he does not believe it prudent to involve an otherworlder in the struggle. The king takes note of his stubbornness, but nonetheless points out that the war is of great importance to the kingdom, and at the current rate they will only sustain more losses, also remarking that Yuya came of his own volition this time. The minister tries to argue back, but before he can do so, Eris eerily appears behind him and pulls on his hair, revealing it to be a wig, as the room is illuminated by his shining bald head. Yuya gives a low punch, joking about the minister's mastery of light magic, causing the royal family to laugh. As the bald minister is paralyzed with shame, Yuya recalls that he cursed him 2 years prior with a hex that made him lose 1 hair per 100 steps, and forgot to remove it when he left. Defeated, Belrius declares that he will not be rewarded even if he contributes to the war, before storming out of the throne room. And the king takes that as the minister's acceptance of Yuya joining the war effort. With that issue settled, he tells the hero that the kingdom has formed a united front with the Irvania Holy Empire, as well as the alliance of city-states and the heroes and adventurers. The combined army has assembled on the eastern side of the plain east of Fristal, and they expect the battle to commence within a few days, so the king asks Yuya to help out there. Accepting the king's command, Yuya prepares to head to the battlefield at once. Malthuria then steps in, asking to go as well despite her father's protests, certain that they can win the war with Yuya's help. She also notes that with Vice Captain Reg, Duke Rans, Tia, herself, and Raylia also present, it will mark the return of the hero party and boost the soldiers' morale. The king sees the wisdom in her words, and formally orders her to go help the hero and join the army under Leon. Yuya then prepares to depart as soon as Mel is ready, promising to do his best to bring back good news in a few days. The king and queen express their gratitude for their continued assistance, telling him not to push himself too hard. And now, back to the present. Leon meets up with Yuya and the rest outside the army camp, surprised to see him again along with his sister. The hero then hands him a letter from the king, which he promptly reads, and deciding to save further questions for later, confirms that Yuya has joined the war effort. Thanking him for coming, he invites him to the command tent to review their strategy for the upcoming battle. At the command tent, Prince Leon asks Yuya and Raylia if they have no objection participating in the meeting, and the young man reassures him that she is just there to help him out. With that sorted out, Yuya asks the prince about the strength of the armies facing each other, and the strategy they're planning to employ. General Reagan explains that the enemy has 20,000 heavy cavalry, 15,000 light cavalry, and 40,000 footmen, as well as archers and support units, bringing the total to 80,000 men, as well as an unknown number of mages. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Arianis has 20,000 men, while the Urvania Holy Empire has contributed 10,000 men, and the Alliance a further 5,000. And they also count with a volunteer force of 3,000 adventurers. Facing an army twice their size, Yuya realizes he won't be enough to close the gap, but the situation is not nearly as hopeless as he thought. He wished he could use some kind of wide-range magic to help eradicate the entire enemy force in a single blow like in manga. Unfortunately, he focused all of his training on battle skills needed for the boss fights against the Demon Lord and Evil God, and thus lacks skills capable of dealing with multiple foes. Thus, he concludes that the key to victory will lie in teamwork between the different armies of the Alliance. Leon then tells him that according to the reconnaissance report, the enemy will most likely approach in a moon-shaped formation with the light cavalry forming the right wing, the heavy cavalry the left wing, and a mix of footmen and heavy cavalry in the center, with the support units behind them. He believes that the enemy will attack at the center using their heavy cavalry, sending the light cavalry to flank the combined army while infantry advances and the heavy cavalry in the right wing deals the killing blow. Yuya notes that the orthodox strategy is expected from such a large force, due to the difficulty in maneuvering such a large force, noting that the ideal thing would be to surround them. Since their numerical inferiority prevents them from doing this, he expects the Imperial Army to attack them in that formation while they hold the eastern end of the battlefield. He finds the situation convenient, noting that his preparations will not be in vain. Leon then declares that their strategy is completely free now, since they didn't expect him to join them, asking Yuya to lay out his plan. The hero wishes to keep the battle as short as possible due to the gap in manpower, especially since any casualties would put further strain on a country already ravaged by the Demon War. Duke Rands then nervously looks at Yuya, asking if he plans to repeat the strategy he used for Gardas Fort. That fortress was used by the Demon Lord as a staging ground for invading the south, providing a safe rallying point for offensive operations. That time, Yuya had formed contracts with other beasts besides Raylia and the Shadow Wolf, such as a creature with the ability to control small animals in the area. Thus, they used that ability to gather swarms of insects. General Vistus then recalls that his magic managed to eradicate 10,000 demons and made the fort unusable, while also scaring their own army senseless. Rands eerily notes that it was not magic but the power of the creature he summoned, but the hero explains that he will not use that, since they don't have the time and the location is not suitable. Vice Captain Reg then tells him that the adventurers are commanded by the A-rank party from the HQ of the kingdom. Yuya then asks him to summon them and proceeds to show those present his plan before they arrive. After some time, Yuya concludes his presentation, promising to reduce their casualties to a minimum, while breaking the Empire's army, but noting that adventurers will be placed under a significant burden. Reg wonders if they will have enough men, and General Reagan suggests that they send their mages to the adventurers team so the Earth mages and builders can finish the preparations and rest before the battle. The general then points out that the outcome of the battle will depend on how well that thing will work, noting there is no need to check on it first and being optimistic about the outcome. Yuya thanks them all, explaining that Mel will help him and the adventurers while Raylia will deal with the light cavalry, telling her that there is no need to wipe them out to a man since they will withdraw once they lose their commander and sustain enough losses. He also assigns Tia to aid the dragon, searching for the commanders from the sky, and though both agree with the plan, Raylia once again insists that she can just obliterate the entire enemy army. Yuya points out that the war is between the kingdom and the empire, and that the appearance of an unrelated dragon in a battle between humans would cause trouble down the line, so she should stay in the sidelines as much as possible. Prince Leon agrees with this, noting that even if they did win with Raylia's strength, another country will just attack them next, and that they have to actively contribute to the outcome of the battle. He also points out that they were prepared to fight even before the heroes arrived, and despite their position now being more favorable, they still decide to think of their positioning with care. A knight enters the tent, informing those present that the Minotaur's horn party has arrived. Yuya is confused by this, noting that the world has nothing to do with Greece. and the prince lets them in. The adventurers then proceed to give their names, all of which seem to come straight out of adult films. And their leader, Eric Koch, proudly declares that it is an honor to fight side by side with the hero. Yuya is having none of it, however, as he states that all of their names are a no-go, inwardly crying and pointing out that each name is wordplay on erotic stuff. Glad that it is not Earth, he brushes the matter off and announces that the adventurers will play a key role in the battle, proceeding to explain the details. Sometime later, Eric realizes only they can perform the task, and proudly agree to do their part. Yuya then declares that he is glad to hear that, unlike their names. The next day, the massive Imperial army advances on the battlefield in the expected formation, and the Alliance troops form up to meet them. Yuya surveys the battlefield from a nearby hill, noting it's already midday, and the sun is blocked by the clouds, which, together with the lack of wind, is the perfect setting for his plan to unfold. He and his party are south of the Imperial army and are hiding with perception-blocking magic, and see that though the army has finished forming at the front, the rear is still busy moving around. Yuya guesses that they will finish preparing that day and start the offensive the next morning, being pressed by the fact that the united army has already finished its preparations. This was planned beforehand to press the enemy and distract them from their scheme. Raylia then declares it's time to start, and Mel confirms that she is ready. Yuya then declares the beginning of the plan, reminding everyone of their role. For the sake of the plan, he brought some things from Japan, including his beloved new motorbike as well as chainsaws and other expendable items, which put a hole in his pocket for sure. He notes that if they prove useless, it would be a huge loss for him, planning to vent his frustrations on the Empire's army. As Mel sits behind him, the hero begins the execution of his plan. The united army begins its march to the beat of the drums. Noting Prince Leon's nervousness, Duke Rans reassures him, stating that with the hero's help, they are certain to win, recommending instead that he start thinking about how to deal with the aftermath. Leon retorts that he's not worried about losing the battle, noting that Rans seems to trust Yuya a lot after having traveled with him. He brushes it off, stating that despite having no interest in politics, he's a good fighter, and that if he thinks all preparations are complete, then nothing can go wrong, warning him, however, that his personality is somewhat disagreeable. The Imperial heavy cavalry begins to charge across the battlefield as Yuya watches, noting that their forces have been ordered to hold their positions as soon as they make their move in order to buy some time before the clash. Placing a barrier around the bike, Yuya accelerates and charges at the cavalry's flank, knocking away any riders in his path. Upon his command, Malthuria uses fire magic and lights several firecrackers and fireworks. This startles the cavalry, and despite their commander's attempts to maintain cohesion and keep charging, the terrified mounts fall prey to the panic and throw off their riders, while the united cavalry strikes back. Mel excitedly remarks that the plan seems to be working. Yuya ramming the horses with his bike with the barrier up would only put a few hundred riders out of action, so in order to stop the entire charge, he gave Mel 30 sets of fireworks and firecrackers to throw around. Horses in that world have similar diets and temperaments to those back on Earth, and as herbivores they have a very strong flight instinct and should scare pretty easily, not being used to fireworks, and they also tend to have a herd mentality, with all panicking if one panics. This created the perfect opportunity for the united forces to strike. With this front dealt with, Yuya and Mel continue to press ahead. Elsewhere, the adventurers face off the heavy cavalry of the left wing. As they brace for the charge, several mages use their powers to launch fireballs at the knights, causing some casualties. Their commander attempts to rally his troops, only to be run over by Yuya's bike. The hero notes that the horns of the Minotaur party are holding their ground, having halted the left wing. He turns to hear the cries of wounded men, and tells Mel to head there. Heeding his command, the princess reaches the wounded adventurers and heals their injuries, declaring that she will stay there to support them with her healing powers. Far away from the battlefield, Raylia watches the situation unfold. As the battle rages on, she tells Tia to prepare since their time has come. The Beastkin states that she is ready whenever the dragon is, since she doesn't need to prepare that much. But despite that statement, Raylia immediately notices her tail wagging nervously and tells her to calm down, since the battle has not yet begun. Tia apologizes for this, admitting that she got a little excited, as she was finally getting back at the Empire. Raylia then recalls that Tia's family died as slaves, and she almost became a slave herself, and notes that the Empire is the only nation that hasn't abolished slavery. She thus understands her excitement, and seeing her eagerness, notes that Yuya would probably be pleased to hear that she is so motivated to do her job, as is Raylia herself. Seeing the light cavalry charge, Raylia transforms into her dragon form right before the soldiers and unleashes her flaming breath on them, causing some casualties before taking to the skies. The scared cavalrymen open fire with their bows, but the arrows fail to even dent her thick skin. Tia then scans the force, searching for their commander, finally locating him as he tries to reorganize his troops and singling him out for Raylia to attack. As the Imperial forces fire in their direction, Tia tells Raylia to hand her the thing, upon which the dragon opens a small portal, allowing her to retrieve a Molotov cocktail. Setting it alight, the Beast Girl throws the bottle in the direction of the Imperial cavalry, its flames engulfing the enemy troops. The Black Dragon notes that if Yuya intended to set fire to the Imperials, she could have just used her fire breath on them. But Tia laughs insanely, as she readies the next projectile, noting that watching the troops scream while they burn to death isn't too bad either. Uncomfortable, Raylia wonders to herself if her comrade has become possessed by a demon, shocked by her cruelty, as the small girl directs her towards their new target, and gleefully rains down fire on the battlefield. Meanwhile, in the United Army camp, a watchman reports that Yuya will soon be at the center of the Imperial Army. As General Reagan leads the 1st and 2nd Battalion in a charge, Prince Leon sees the battle from a distance, seeing the fireworks in action and recalling the demonstration Yuya gave them. According to his strategy, the lights and noises would distract the heavy cavalry and hold them back for around 10 minutes, giving them the opportunity to strike with their own riders and footmen to decide the battle. The United Infantry will not attack any riders who are charging at full speed to minimize losses, and will only strike at the stunned ones, though some cavalrymen will break through. As the watchman informs them that the cavalry is approaching the first line of defense, the prince gives the signal, while noting that none of that would have been possible without Yuya's chainsaw. The Imperial cavalry approaches a line of sharpened stakes, and as the first soldiers charge through the gaps between them, they are toppled by the wires strung between the stakes. Though initially stunned by this, they believe they find an opening where the enemy forgot to set up wires, confidently charging forward only to be toppled by the hidden obstacle. Standing atop a watchtower, the watchman informs Prince Leon of the success of Operation Wire. Yuya had used the chainsaw to prepare the spikes, and gave them steel wire to tie between them at a height in which the charging horsemen would not notice before it was too late. Stringing black wire on the spots the enemy would mistake for openings, thus buying time. Having breached the fence, the Imperials reached the second line of defense, only for them to fall prey to hidden pitfalls, all according to Yuya's plan. His strategy to minimize their casualties while maximizing enemy losses is close to perfect, and he faces hardships head-on while leading their soldiers and inspiring the people, all qualities befitting his title of hero. He was always at the front line of their battles with the armies of the Demon King and the Evil God, fighting tirelessly for victory. But Leon notes that his plans for this battle were unexpected. He is about to say something about it, but as if reading his mind, Duke Lance notes that this isn't like the hero at all. The mage then explains that Yuya makes it so that they always have the advantage and takes the initiative by setting traps, in a strategy that he finds as disagreeable as his personality. He then recalls when they fought the Demon King, Yuya distracted him with a speech while preparing a spell, later disabling their foes' spells and movements and blasting him from a distance with magic and projectiles. Yuya will only fight fair and square as a last resort, preferring a safer option, and is more than willing to fight dirty to win. While Leon ponders on this, the watchman informs that the Imperials are back in formation and fast approaching, and Lance and the prince step forward with their mages to meet them, waiting for them to get closer. Meanwhile, Yuya finally makes his way to the Imperial center, realizing that there are far too many soldiers for him to just run over with his barrier. Though the barrier protects him and his bike from damage, he is losing momentum, and he has lost half his speed, wishing he had a bigger bike and lamenting the limitations of this middle-class vehicle, but parking that thought for later. He then notices a carriage with a man on top who he believes must be their supreme commander, veering straight toward him. He then notices a knight in his path raising a great sword, slamming it against his barrier, grinding the bike to a halt. Yuya seems to recognize the man, who in turn identifies him as the hero, surprised to see him in that world. The former hero then raises his sword in defiance, stating that he has returned to help his friends get rid of some garbage. As Yuya and the Imperial champion exchange blows, the man notes that the summoning circle was destroyed, demanding to know how he got there, causing the young man to realize how far they went to ensure he didn't return. Refusing to answer, he presses his attack and closes the distance before pulling a can of pepper spray from his inventory, using it to blind the knight. Though he calls him a coward, Yuya pays him no mind and presses his advantage, slaying the man with a single slash before turning his attention to the supreme commander of the Imperial army sitting atop his carriage. The officer furiously berates his men and urges them to slay the hero, but soon enough the young man cuts his way to him and jumps aboard the carriage, asking if he is the supreme commander while looming over him. Shocked, the man berates him and warns he won't get away with this, only to be knocked out by a single punch. Yuya identifies him as the Imperial Crown Prince, and though he had initially intended to kidnap or straight up slay the Supreme Commander, he decides to take him back to the United Army so Prince Leon can deal with him. Though he knows little about politics, he gauges that he might be worth more to them while he is still alive, and noting that if everything went according to plan back at the camp, the battle should be over, he swiftly teleports away. Back at the United Army camp, Prince Leon and Duke Lance stand in silent shock at the horrifying scene before them, as all the riders who had entered the camp perished within seconds. The prince asks the mage what was used if not poison, and the latter replies that Yuya taught him about this, though he is not sure about it himself. According to what he explained, humans need air to breathe, and that air must possess a certain concentration of what he calls particles, with flames requiring those very particles in order to burn. Thus, if the mages closed off the space on the top and sides with magic, and blow wind through it to remove the particles, their concentration becomes dangerously low, causing the men to suffocate. Leon notes that the soldiers should have been able to hold their breath while sensing something was wrong, but the mage counters that the concentration of particles was so low that they would lose consciousness in just 1 or 2 breaths, and the same principle would apply to any animal or monster. The mage then tells him that he cannot explain it any further since he doesn't fully understand it himself, but also points out that they do not want word of this magic to spread. Agreeing with this, Leon notes that the discovery of new ways to kill with magic is dangerous, proposing they cover this up. Yuya then arrives, and without looking back, the prince asks him if he was successful. Staring at the pile of dead soldiers, the former hero confirms that he won, and everyone soon hears the Imperials sounding the retreat. Coldly, Prince Leon notes that they have indeed won. As the battle draws to a close, Prince Leon orders his troops around, making preparations to receive the wounded while the infantry captures the Imperial stragglers. The cavalry secures the perimeter and the engineers set up the new encampment. Looking around as everyone hurries about their business, Yuya sees that there is nothing left for him to do at the moment, and as the troops secure the perimeter, he considers helping out with the relief efforts, but realizes the mood feels kind of heavy with him there. Though it is safe to assume that the Empire is no longer an immediate threat, he is aware that it is only a temporary reprieve, since they didn't wipe out all of their forces. He is pulled from his thoughts as he sees Raylia flying overhead. As they land and approach him, Yuya congratulates the pair for their work, asking if they're hurt at all, with both confirming to be safe and sound since the Imperials were no match for them. He then notices the Beast Girl intently looking at him with her feline eyes, soon realizing she's expecting him to praise her. Patting her on the head, she thanks them both for perfectly handling the Imperial left wing and aiding in victory, with the Black Dragon confidently noting that it was no trouble at all, and asking what their next move would be. He states that they will talk about that when everyone is back, suggesting that they take a break first, and Tia enthusiastically states that they shall wait for everyone else close by, overjoyed at being praised. Seeing them head off, Yuya is glad to see that he is not alone anymore. Back at the command tent of the United Army, Prince Leon praises everyone for their hard work, stating that thanks to their efforts they showed the Imperials that they are a force to be reckoned with, and extending his heartfelt gratitude to them as a representative of the kingdom of Arianis. General Reagan then briefs them about the death toll, reporting 1,253 dead and 895 gravely injured, with the losses being divided among the kingdom, the domain, the City-State Federation, and the adventurers and volunteers, the latter bearing the brunt of the carnage. This does not surprise Yuya, since by the time Mel joined them to heal their wounds, many were caught up in a fray with no way to retreat, having to face heavy cavalry without giving up an inch of land. Though he knows they're at war, the burden of having so many people lost over a plan that he himself suggested weighs heavy on his soul, and Raylia notices his grim demeanor. The general then continues his report detailing the Imperial losses, estimating that 12,000 heavy cavalrymen perished and 3,000 were captured, while 10,000 light cavalry perished, mostly losing their lives at the hands of Tia and Raylia in the left wing. He then lists the losses of the infantry, including 15,000 mercenary deserters who mostly surrendered to them seeking asylum. In total, he reckons the Imperials lost 31,000 killed and 5,000 captured, and counting the deserters, they estimate that the Empire's forces went from 80,000 soldiers to 30,000, with an unknown number of those being injured, while they retained 10,000 infantrymen stationed at Fristol. The representatives of the Alliance are shocked at the number of losses sustained by the Imperials in a single battle, with one of them calling it a complete victory and rejoicing at this overwhelming triumph, thanking Yuya for his strategy and hard work, as well as Raylia for her power, though none of them react to their cheers. Duke Lance then states that though they were victorious, this victory came at a cost, having also sustained great losses at Fristol where the Imperial survivors are stationed. Taking over from him, Vice Captain Bruno Reg states that despite being in Kingdom territory, the city of Fristol is currently occupied by the Empire, and unlike on the battlefield, they are holding civilians hostage in the city, so fighting them there would be very different from what happened that day. As others continue to debate, Yuya realizes that Lance and Reg have noticed he wasn't happy, and changed the topic of the conversation, having known each other for a long time and knowing each other's thoughts. Having suffered over 4,000 casualties that day, including the wounded, the praise showered upon him tastes like ash in his mouth. Though he doesn't have any regrets concerning his strategy, he feels terrible from all this loss of life, bearing down on him. The Imperial's losses were far greater than theirs, but during his 3 years living in that world he learned how dangerous it is to have mercy on his enemies, so he cannot bring himself to sympathize with them, and he needs to focus on their next move. Prince Leon then states that the war is far from over, but that day they will celebrate their victory. Having secured plenty of Imperial resources as spoils of war, he assigns some men to guard duty, but wants to give the rest some well-deserved rest. He especially praises the adventurers and volunteers for pulling through their dangerous mission, having suffered greater losses than any other faction in their army, and allowing the United Army infantry to fight uninterrupted. Giving them his heartfelt gratitude, he tells them that they will be rewarded when they return to the capital, and will hand them some liquor to celebrate. The leader of the Horns of the Minotaur party then thanks him for his gratitude, noting that most of them risk their lives every day for money or just the thrill of it, and though he thanks them for mourning their losses, he states that they did it because they wanted to, grinning at Yuya while saying this. As the prince accepts this, Yuya notes to himself that he is far too obvious, and addresses the prince in turn, requesting 10,000 cavalrymen of him. Seeing their startled faces, he makes it clear that it does not need to be right then, and tomorrow would be fine as well. General Reagan then asks what he plans to do with those troops, and he explains that a direct attack on the Imperial occupiers at Frystal would only cause the loss of even more of the good people of the kingdom, namely the citizens being held hostage there. Instead of doing this, Yuya confidently proposes taking the Imperial capital. Both Prince Leon and General Reagan fall silent upon hearing Yuya's bold proposal. The hero goes on to explain that the capital also has a force of about 30,000 men guarding it, but unlike the seasoned soldiers garrisoning Frystal, they are just glorified security guards with no combat experience. And having visited the Imperial capital in the past, he's familiar with its layout. On top of that, the Imperials have deployed their full military force to help with their invasion, meaning that they are stretched too thin and too far away to act as reinforcements for the capital. The guards protecting the Imperial Palace itself are indeed the cream of the crop, but now that the Empire cannot use its army to defend itself, the hero believes he can head straight for their seat of power and apprehend their emperor. Confident in his plan, he declares that if the kingdom plans on invading the capital, now would be the perfect time to do so. Pondering this, Prince Leon acknowledges that such a strategy might help them, and asks Reagan if it can be done. The general replies that if the horses are stripped of their war gear, leaving only the saddles, they could reach the capital in about 10 days. Fortunately, they have enough steeds for the task after capturing thousands of Imperial horses from the battlefield, but they still need men to ride them on such an endeavor. Duke Lance then steps in, offering to provide a few of his sorcerers who can use storage magic, noting that they can only hold one carriage's worth of supplies per person, but between them, they should be able to cover the expedition's logistical needs for 10 days. Leon agrees to this, declaring that the other sorcerers will help secure Frystal, but another officer points out they will not be enough to hold that city, since they would not last if the Empire deployed their forces once more. Yuya knows this is true, since despite the crushing defeat they dealt the Imperials on the battlefield, they still have 40,000 men in Frystal, and even the entire allied force of 20,000 is not much of a threat against them. Hearing this, Raylia offers to stay behind, confidently declaring that if the Imperials even dare to think about setting foot outside of Frystal, she shall turn into a dragon and scare them out of that notion, though they're welcome to try and leave. Yuya is surprised by her offer, but General Reagan states that now that they have the dragon's help to secure Frystal, they should set out for the Imperial capital as soon as they're ready, with the Leon declaring that he shall serve as supreme commander of the forces that will be sent on this mission. Both Yuya and Malthuria are surprised by this turn of events, with the hero insisting that his idea is still dangerous, and the princess insisting that her brother should stay and command the troops sent to retake Frystal. Leon is adamant, however, stating that he is aware of the risks, but pointing out that after they succeed in taking the Imperial capital, there will be a huge political fallout. Noting that Yuya does not intend on completely ruining the Empire, he insists that they will need someone who can make decisions regarding the signing of treaties, or overseeing the post-war recovery, and he is by far the best candidate in that regard. He adds that Malthuria is not great at political negotiations, also teasing her, noting that since she seems hellbent on spending time with him, her feelings might make her lose sight of what's really important. This causes her to seethe with embarrassment, as she attempts to deny this. He then reassures her that General Vistus will do the actual commanding while he just follows Yuya's lead, promising not to put himself in danger, upon which the princess relents. while the hero inwardly notes that in case things do go awry, he can always teleport to the prince back to the kingdom. With the issue settled, Leon declares that they will make their preparations the next day, and ride the day after that at dawn, following a path that would fool the Imperials and Fristol into believing that he is heading back to the palace before turning and heading towards the Imperial capital. This invasion was not part of the plan, so Yuya is glad to have some soldiers with him. Still, he is nervous, since Mel and Leon, being royals, are way too quick to jump into action, regardless of the peril. In the following days, they set out for the Imperial capital with a force of 12,000 cavalrymen, with the remaining forces being ordered to encircle Fristol to avoid an attack from the rear. The cavalry unit riding for the capital is led by Leon, with the General Vistus of the domain as second in command, with Bruno Reg, Lance, and Tia tagging along. General Reagan is in charge of the encirclement of Fristol, with Raylia, Mel, and the volunteer army providing backup. The other adventurers mostly split into small groups to capture Imperial stragglers, but the horns of the Minotaur ended up coming with Yuya to the capital for some reason. He believes that if everything goes according to plan, then the war with the Empire is almost over, and even if something goes wrong, he will not let it stop him. As their journey comes to an end, the capital of the Beals Empire finally comes into view. Though the journey would have normally taken longer, they were able to arrive within 7 days, riding heavy cavalry warhorses with no war gear. The group then decides to enter, charging straight to the main gate, blasting it apart with magic. Once inside, they gallop at full speed through the main road reserved for nobles, heading straight for the Imperial Palace. Yuya is concerned by the lack of patrols or soldiers on the way, and watches with suspicion at the open gates leading to the palace. Fearing a trap, he summons Kagero, and sends him ahead to scout for traps and capture the Emperor if he is unopposed. Much to his surprise, the giant wolf dashes past the guards without them moving to stop it, but he decides to charge in anyway, confident he can handle whatever comes his way. His confusion becomes even greater when he arrives at the palace courtyard only to be greeted by a person of noble birth accompanied by an older man and several guards. As the party dismounts, Yuya and Prince Leon are greeted by this young man, who identifies himself as Leon's Luchar de Beals, third prince of the Beals Empire. Yuya is surprised to meet the Empire's third prince, being unaware that he even existed prior to this moment. He knew of the Emperor and the idiotic crown prince he apprehended on the battlefield, and had heard that the second prince was kind of gloomy, and though he had heard rumors about a third prince, he never expected him to be like this, being out of his depth with him. Breaking the tense silence, Leon introduces himself to the third prince, assuming from his warm welcome that he knows why they have come there that day, and demanding he bring his imperial majesty to them. After a brief pause, the young man solemnly replies that the Emperor passed away 3 days ago, a revelation that shocks and confuses both Leon and Yuya. The prince then asks if the crown prince would be the next in line to the throne, and though Lyonis admits that this would normally be the case, his brother faces accusations of deploying the forces of the Empire without his majesty's permission. If those allegations were proven to be true, then he would be guilty of treason, and thus have no rights to the imperial throne. Unamused, Leon asks if this means that the sudden invasion of his kingdom was brought on by the crown prince, without the broader empire's knowledge, but the third prince notes that it is not quite so. Indeed, he declares that although the throne does not endorse the current situation, the crown prince's actions do reflect upon the empire, and as such, the would-be successor must still be held accountable for it. Growing impatient, Prince Leon asks what he means by this, and Lyonis explains that, with the crown prince under trial, his brother Bard is second in line to the throne, but he has recently abdicated since he cares very little about anything other than his research. Finally, Leon asks if that means the third prince is now the emperor, and as he confirms this, he then asks how they shall end their current war. Solemnly, Emperor Lyonis formally offers the surrender of the empire to the Kingdom of Arianis, the Ilvinia domain, and the Eastern City-State Federation. Leon and Yuya are surprised by the swift capitulation, but the Emperor explains that with the return of the hero and the Black Dragon to Arianis, the Empire has lost interest in prolonging the war, since it would only bring their people strife and ruin. Yuya knows that he indeed has no other option, since the Empire committed their full force in the invasion and lost half of their men, only for the enemy to come knocking at their door with the hero in tow. Though some concessions are inevitably in order, one would expect Lyonis to try to get a peace treaty or ceasefire before surrendering, and the hero believes the recent passing of the Emperor is not a mere coincidence. Regardless of how he passed away, the Emperor is no more, and to top it off, the Crown Prince has fallen to disgrace and the second prince has abdicated, which makes Yuya suspect that the third prince was the one pulling the strings around there, but his motives remain unknown. Lyonis then suggests they get comfortable before negotiating the terms of their surrender, offering them rooms in the palace. Yuya and Leon look at each other, having no good reason to decline, but refusing to let their guard down. After confirming that Kagero did not detect any sign of an ambush or trap, they agree, on the condition that they take 20 soldiers with them and they're allowed to take their weapons, which the Emperor agrees to, leaving a servant to see to them. As he departs, Yuya whispers to General Vistus that things are going way too smoothly, wondering what their host's true intentions are, and the officer and Leon share this concern, with the latter telling his companions to remain vigilant. Once they're all sitting around the table, the Emperor's aide begins negotiations, offering the official surrender of the Empire to the Allied powers, asking for their terms. Leon then proceeds to demand the immediate retreat of the Imperial forces at Frystal, and the return of any goods they plundered, as well as compensation for the damages incurred during the invasion. Furthermore, he demands the abolishment of slavery within the Empire, and the criminalization of slave trafficking, along with legislation to compensate the slaves who were captured during the raids, and aid in their repatriation. He also declares that Allied forces will be stationed within the Empire until the previous demands are met, the cost of which will be paid exclusively with Imperial funds, while the Empire guarantees the security of Allied troops and government officials. The Imperial secretaries mutter among themselves, with Yuya noting to himself that the clauses concerning slavery must be hard to swallow. The Empire's labor force is mostly built on slavery, which keeps costs low and allows for their huge military spending, and the expansion of their territories, with even civilians owning slaves. Moreover, he does not expect them to sit back and accept paying for the occupation of their country. After some thought, the Emperor suggests just releasing the slaves from the Allied nations, since some were sentenced to slavery for crimes or bankruptcy, acknowledging they have not done their best to stop the slavers' raids, despite not endorsing them. Leon counters that it would be impossible to differentiate the slaves based on their origin, so all must be released. The Emperor agrees to this, and then switches to the matter of occupation, agreeing not to stand in their way but asking that they establish the conditions for their departure beforehand, so they may regain their independence. They then spent an hour working out the details, and before they knew it, they had reached an agreement. Regardless of the Third Prince's plans, the war was now over, even if it came back to bite them later on, though Yuya doesn't think it's over yet. Lyones, on the other hand, inwardly notes that some conditions are unexpected, but none are outrageous, being exactly what he needed for his plans. In truth, he finds the imperial notion of a united continent as vain and foolish, and slavery is unsustainable, since those benefiting from it do not give back to the empire, and the practice itself leading to poverty and mass emigration by disrupting the job market. He planned to seize the opportunity to abolish slavery so the poor can find jobs and boost their dying economy, using their defeat in the war as an excuse to push it through regardless of internal opposition. The Empire has certainly suffered a great loss, with the hero turning the tide of the battle and brokering the ceasefire agreement, but despite the setback, his joining the fray turned out to be a good thing for the Empire and Third Prince, who expects to have his hands full for a while. Back at Arianis, Yuya and Tia head to the palace in disguise to give their report to the king. The Beast Girl is thrilled that they succeeded in saving the kingdom, and though he knows he played a great part in the battle, he cannot be happy after so much blood was spilled. Once in the palace, they are greeted by the maid Eris, who offers her body for him to ravage in gratitude. Malthuria tells her to stop with the jokes, but the maid merely asks if that means she must wait her turn before the princess, embarrassing her. Yuya then proceeds to greet the king, who congratulates him, as the hero hands him the record of their agreement with the Empire and a letter addressed to him. Reading it, the king orders Minister Belrias that he oversee the deployment of the occupation forces to the Empire, and the minister begrudgingly thanks the hero as he walks by. The king then thanks Yuya for everything, but he replies that he was just trying to protect his friends in the kingdom, stating that he should thank Tia, Raylia, and Malthuria as well. His Majesty insists on rewarding him, however, and noting that he is from another world, he once again offers his daughter, stating that what she lacks in the chest she makes up for in other areas, causing the queen to beat him senseless. She then takes over thinking of a proper reward, also thanking Tia for all she did for them. Seeing everyone he cared about safe and sound, Yuya feels glad. He is startled and shocked by Eris' sudden appearance, where she offers herself yet again, determined to lock himself in his room to save himself. Returning to the shrine of the goddess Valienis, Yuya asks to be left alone to pray. Soon the goddess appears before him, talking in an annoying manner as he asks something of her. Dropping the act, she declares that she will answer his questions, and he asks why he was still able to use magic when he returned to his world. She replies that he gained his magic and powers on his own, so she cannot take those from him, And though she gave him a head start with his inventory, appraisal, and multi-language skills, he mastered them on his own. Yuya then notes that summoning between separate worlds should not be possible, asking what she is trying to make him do. She replies that she never properly thanked him for slaying the evil god Luenavilio, remaining serious despite his dismay, and proceeds to hand him 2 teleportation relics that would allow travel between worlds. These orbs serve as a location anchor and time axis anchor, allowing him to cross between worlds while time remains frozen in his original location like it did when he first returned. He once again asks what she wants him to do with this, to which she replies that she wishes him to establish a bloodline in this world. She then explains that Luenavilio ascended to godhood, absorbing the impurities of the world, meaning that one day he will regain his divine power, and history will repeat itself, since in that world they have no way to cleanse their impurities. Initially, Luenavilio was a kind and benevolent god with a deep love for mankind, but he took the negative energy of humanity upon himself until it drove him into madness. As an evil god, he spread his wickedness and insanity to the humans in the world, and the world will never be rid of this insanity without something from another world. She thus wants Yuya to father children in that world and build a legacy there, but she was not sure if he would agree to return. He asks if she was responsible for the Imperial invasion, but she replies it was merely a struggle amongst humans, but he was bound to return even without such petty tricks, now that his lifespan has lengthened so much. She then explains to the surprised Yuya that he has gained the gift of longevity from absorbing vast amounts of mana, as well as attaining some divinity after slaying Luenavilio, expecting he will live twice as long as a normal human. Dead serious, she states that though she cannot force him to do so, she was thinking that he should father at least 20 children to establish a successful bloodline, but ideally, he should have 100. He vehemently opposes this, yelling that she is out of her mind asking a 23-year-old virgin to have 100 kids. Having had answers to all his questions, he decides to head back, telling Luenavilio he said hi. Wishing him the best of luck, the goddess departs once more, leaving him alone in the shrine. Though Yuya is happy with the teleportation relics, the longer lifespan and duty to build a bloodline weighs heavily on him. He then plans to return to his quarters in the palace and then use the relics to return to his own world around midnight. Suddenly, the implication of all he just heard sinks in, as he falls to his knees, realizing he will never be a normal college student again. Back in his world, Maltheria thanks Yuya's mother for letting her stay at her house, stating she will do her best to learn about their country, though she might need their help from time to time. Tia and Raylia are there as well, causing Ayumi to scream in confusion at the sight of these beautiful women. After all of the stuff with the Empire and Wilterius, Yuya thought he would head back home to Japan. But what awaited him there was a good scolding from his mom, who was waiting for him in the darkness of his home. Though he did tell her he was leaving for a bit, he disappeared for 10 days, and never so much as texted her, causing her to worry. She rightfully demanded to know where he had been, so he told her everything. Though normally she would back off if he didn't want to tell her the details, that day was different. And after he asked her why she was so pushy that day, she noted that he seemed different somehow. In the end, he sat down at the door and told her everything that had happened since the moment he was summoned to Wilterius. As proof, he used his teleportation relics to bring her along to the other side, introducing her to all his friends and family. She wanted to hear all there was to know about what he'd been up to in Wilterius, and they also had an audience with the king and queen, who even apologized for forcing her son to defend their kingdom, even though he was summoned there against his will. Afterwards, his mom heard them out from start to finish while keeping her thoughts and opinions to herself. Afterwards, he had Raylia and Tia give her a tour of the capital and the rest of the kingdom, as well as the battlefield. They spent about 2 weeks there, and during that time, she really opened up to Raylia, Tia, Maltheria, the king, and the queen. And much to his surprise, she even made friends with Minister Belrius, getting along swimmingly with him. Knowing what had actually happened, she finally calmed down, but the peace and quiet did not last long, because now they were there. After doing whatever he could to help the kingdom recover from the war, he thought he would return to Japan, but then his mother happily dropped the fact that Raylia, Tia, and Maltheria would be staying with them for a while. At that point, there wasn't anything to be done about it, so he set to buy them clothes. Still suspicious about these strange and beautiful women, Ayumi insists on knowing why Raylia and the rest are coming to live with them, wanting to know who Maltheria is and why everyone is so pretty, to which Yuya replies it is an act of God. Everything happened pretty fast, and before he knew it, he found himself getting used to eating breakfast with everyone. One such morning, Yuya announced he was going on a trip with his university friends next week, asking them to take care of the house. And much to his surprise, his sister agrees without complaining. He then tells his companions from the other world to take care of the house as well, which they all accept while acting somewhat strange. As the surprised boy wondered why no one complained, Ayumi whispers that Akane was really hyped as well, but he didn't hear it, and is even more confused when she wishes him good luck, despite his exams being over, before exiting the room. Sighing, Yuya gets up and prepares to head to the university, with the girls seeing him off. At the university, he notices a beautiful, brand new bike parked outside, wondering to whom it may belong to. He is immediately enamored by this 400cc bike, which is far superior to his own, and decides to get out before getting too depressed, as well as picking up more shifts at work. Entering the classroom where he was supposed to meet his friends, he's surprised to see Akane sitting there, as the meeting gets underway. She sometimes comes to hang out at the club room, but that day his touring club had a meeting about their summer trip exclusively for members, and he did not believe that she would be sitting in just for the fun of it. The club president then introduces her as their newest member, revealing, much to Yuya's shock, that she will be joining them on their trip next week. As they go over their itinerary, he asks her what's going on, and why she didn't tell him about this. She replies that she got her license a while back and got her bike the previous week, so she thought of joining the touring club. She also retorts that he didn't tell her about Raylia either, revealing that she knows she's living with him now and calling him a pervert for it. He tries to defend himself, stating that it was her mother who decided to let her stay with them, and that he was completely unaware, but their arguments are cut short by the club president, who teases them about being friends, and causes them to become the center of attention. He then gives those present a handout explaining their route and where they'll be staying, telling Yuya to make sure Akane has everything she needs for the trip before dismissing the group. Once outside, Akane nervously asks Yuya if he is dating Raylia, Tio, or Maltheria, causing the surprised young man to wave the notion away, and frantically declare that he is single. He then tells her that unfortunately his girlfriendless record is still going strong. Brimming with the joy at this, she notes he has zero game, her remarks stabbing him like so many knives. He is still shocked that she got a motorcycle, and is even more shocked to realize she is the owner of the new bike he saw on the lot, asking if her dad just to let her buy one. Akane's dad is obsessed with his little girl to almost a weird degree, getting super defensive with any guys approaching her. When he went over to Akane's place to help her study for her exams, he gave him a glass of sparkling water mixed with soy sauce, saying it was a Coke, which got him in some serious trouble when Akane and his wife found out. He is still surprised that he would let her get a bike without throwing a fit, but it all becomes clear when she reveals that her parents met each other because they were both bike riders, quitting as soon as her mother got pregnant with her. He finds it hard to believe this, recalling this man's remarks about bike riders, but she believes he was just trying to find an excuse to not like him. Akane got her license a month prior after taking lessons for 2 months, having had some trouble slaloming and with the log bridge until she got it right. He asks her if the tour will not be too much, but she shyly notes that they still have a few days until they leave, suggesting they go on a short-distance tour together first. He accepts, causing her to burst with joy, and they proceed to plan their trip for the next Saturday. As they make plans, Yuya notes to himself how peaceful this is, feeling it to be a lot more special than his adventures in Walterius. He knows this special everyday life will be the new status quo, and he is certain that all kinds of things are going to happen, and he will get wrapped up into all sorts of trouble. However, he is confident he's going to be okay. He has many things that he wants to protect, and will not let this new life go to waste, being determined to make it work no matter what. Smiling, he notes that this will be his happily ever after, the days after the hero's return, his return.